start chatting about rowing. I think that'd be really interesting.
Okay.
I think we're doing some interesting stuff. I don't get a chance to chat about rowing and much.
Yeah.
It's weird because I work as a coach. You think we as coaches would sit around and chat about rowing more, but we don't.
Yeah.
We just don't do enough of that. It's more like, right, if we've got a trailer plan for Inverness, we book the hotels, you know, the truck meeting, we go into the garage.
That's why on the beauty of online, you don't have to do any trailering, you don't have to do any de-rigging.
I used to say I'm a lorry driver who watches rowing between shifts.
Yeah.
Which is what it was for a while now. But
yeah, fair enough. I do miss, that's one thing about rowing I do miss, is those like long car journeys to just have that friggin' space. Do you like...
You know, I do my best like thinking on the way back from an event.
Oh, really?
So usually like we did Met Regatta or something like that, and you'd get some results and you'd know where we were, and I'd be like, right, I've got 7-8 hours now where I can't be looking at a phone, I can't be doing anything else, it's just me and the M6.
Yeah.
You do some really good processing of information, and you come back and you're like, right, that's what we're going to do.
Yeah,
Right.
I agree.
Are we on now? Or are we?
I don't know. I guess we
us
could
away?
just start rolling. Yeah, we might as well. Welcome to the Edge Rowing Podcast. I'm here today with my former coach, Colin Williamson. So, Colin's the head coach or director of performance.
Head of rowing is my official title.
Head of rowing at Edinburgh Uni. Relation to me, Colin helped me basically get into the GB team. There's kind of two big coaches that played a big part in that, and I'm just going to shift the camera over a little bit. And yeah, Colin was one of them, that the kind of second part of me getting into the GB team. So had a big impact on my rowing journey and me having like success. And I always thought that there was something about your approach at Edinburgh, especially the interesting thing as well for me was that the Edinburgh wasn't always a competitive group like it was before you got there. It was it was just sort of like, I guess, I don't know that there's anything wrong with it, but just like an average performance university, and then you came in and changed things pretty quickly, and I was lucky to get benefit from that, and the students there now are as well. And then obviously a bit of background, you competed in GB as well, which I always think is super intangible as a coach to have that experience. And then just chat about rowing, maybe first off, Colin, like what was it that got you into this sport?
It's quite a long story, I guess, but I'll try not to make it too long. So always been into sport, really into football when I was younger, and then sort of in secondary school it was rugby primarily, a bit of hockey as well, and cricket and athletics, all of those things through school, so really sporty. And then rugby really sort of took over when I was about sort of 15, 16, and I thought I could be quite good at this. I was going quite well at school, I started playing for the local club, and then when I was thinking of moving on to university, I was like, right, well, where can I go to university and then maybe join a sort of semi-pro type club.
Okay.
I actually took a year out and played rugby for my local club in Perthshire, and just before I sort of went off to university, I managed to break my humerus in the last game of the season, 10 minutes from the end, snapped it right there. So that really put a sort of halt to rugby for at least a year. So I'd had a little taste of rowing at school. So my old headmaster is a guy called Bruce Thompson. He was the headmaster at Strathallan where I was. He's actually now coaching rowing at Glasgow University, does some volunteer coaching with women there. But when I was at Strathallan, he got the gym renovated and they put in some ergos, and he'd get all the rugby guys to sort of jump on, and he'd like, right, do a 2K. I had no idea what I was doing, but one session he said, right, sit down and do 2K, and I was like, okay, I'll have a go at this. And reflecting back, it was quite good. I think I did like a 6:26.
6 holy shit.
Yeah,
really?
I was sort of 17, 18. I'd never rowed before.
First 2K
and I pulled
ever.
that, and I was like, oh, is that good?
Yeah.
The guy was like, yeah. So I just remember Mr. Thompson saying, if you get to university, give rowing a go. And I was like, yeah, I'm not doing that. I'm going to be a rugby player. But obviously this injury happened. I turned up at uni. I couldn't play contact rugby. I thought I'll go down the rowing club just to get fit so I can get back into rugby when this is all healed. And my first coach there was at Aberdeen University. I started as a law student up there. And my first coach was Charlie Simpson.
Shout out Charlie, author of Advanced Rowing. Yeah.
You know, and we've talked a little bit already about, I think your first coach is really influential as to what happens next. If you have a good first coach in the sport and a good experience, that can take you a long way in terms of how well you end up doing, your passion for the sport and a lifelong passion for the sport.
Yeah.
And Charlie instilled a lot in that in me. So basically, I parked rugby.
What was Charlie doing well? Like, what do you think he did well? That gave you a good start in the sport?
I mean, that word passion is there. He was a volunteer coach. He was a sports science lecturer at the University of Aberdeen, and he just had a real passion for that side of it as well, like the programming, and that was probably my first exposure to how to look at the physiology of the sport. And I think getting that in my first experience of the sport, understanding that is a really important factor as to how the body works and how we produce power and how we row fast, was a really important thing to have right at the start.
Yeah, I guess a lot of rowers, maybe you don't get that, they don't want that understanding, or they don't ever get it really. They just get told by the coach like what to do, not why to do it.
Yeah, and I think that with athletes actually, I like athletes. As a coach, sometimes it can be annoying when they're like, why are we doing this session? Just do it.
Yeah.
No, but actually, I want them to be curious about their sessions. Why are we doing this session? What's the
You're going to get asked
session?
50 questions this weekend at Edinburgh.
Which is
why are we
fun.
doing this, Colin? Why? Yeah.
And if you don't have the answer as a coach, then you've got to really think about why you don't have the answer to that. Are you just doing it because everybody else is doing it?
Yeah.
But anyway, Charlie instilled that in me, and I had a really great experience at Aberdeen. Because I had my first ergo when I turned up there was a 6'10" actually, as a novice, second week or something like that. So I got sucked straight into what was their sort of senior group, rather than the novices, which was brilliant because you just accelerate so fast when you're rowing with people who are better than you.
Yeah.
We had a great time that year.
Was Alan there at that point?
So Alan came the year after, so Alan was a year younger than me.
And
so
Alan's he works with us with the coaching, and then he's been friends with Colin since. Yeah.
First time I rowed with Alan was we were on an Aberdeen University training camp up in Inverness, and Alan, obviously from Inverness, he was a junior up there. He was thinking of coming to Aberdeen, so I think we were a man down one session, and we popped Alan in the bow seat. And I always remember that Charlie, I think, was ahead of his time in terms of physiology, in that he had, we all had heart rate monitor straps on. This is back in 2002, late 2002. He had a sort of unit where he had all the heart rate straps, and then he'd take them all and plug them into one unit and get the session data.
Yeah.
And this is ahead, people aren't doing that now, but he was doing that then. And I just remember everyone sort of cruising along, and then here's this 17-year-old kid from Inverness, boom, pulling for all he's worth to try and impress. So that's when I first met Al.
Yeah, cool. Okay. And then you're like, I remember Alan saying that as well. It was a good, enjoyable group. And then from there, what did you start to? You moved on to Leander.
I did eventually. So I actually dropped. I didn't finish my law degree. I did sort of 3 years of it, which is quite a lot to then not finish it. But I just didn't see myself being a lawyer in the end. I enjoyed some of the content.
You got some writing award or something, didn't you? One time.
That was a bit later on. Yeah, I did a bit of student journalism as well.
Law is like
journalist of the year.
Yeah. So there's and then communicating, I guess, is a big part of coaching and writing down plans. You will give a good WhatsApp message in group chats where you talk about the plan, and you would always explain things very clearly.
Communication is pretty important. I mean, it's part of the athlete's understanding what you're trying to do and trying to get the right message over. But that was instilled in me from quite a few coaches I had over the years. Obviously starting with Charlie, and then Aberdeen, I left, and I think at that point I was like, how good could I be at this sport? And if I'm going to get better, where am I going to go? And at that time, and even now, Leander's one of the places to go. You're like, well, if I want to make the national team, I need to go there. And I wanted to win Henley as well. At Aberdeen, I had a great time. Actually, I've mentioned Ali Patterson as my other coach there. So after Charlie left Aberdeen University, I had Ali Patterson, who she'd actually been the GB women's cox at the Barcelona Olympics. And then she coached the Aberdeen Boat Club when they won the Y-fold at Henley in 2002, which was the only ever Scottish win until we did it a few years later. So she was a brilliant coach as well. So I was really lucky. There's a bit of a theme to my journey here in that I have benefited from really good coaches at every stage. And that's fed into my own coaching. 2 years with Aberdeen Boat Club, and we got to 2 semi-finals actually at Henley, and never quite sort of converted it, but that was pretty good back then from Aberdeen. And then I decided to take the leap and move down to Leander, which was scary at the time. I think I left with like £100 in my pocket, nowhere to live,
figure
no
it
job. I was like, let's just go for it.
Well,
So
that'll last you. Back then, it would have lasted you at Leander like 6 months.
yeah, 1 penny porridge. And,
Was that how much it was?
Yeah. I know there was outrage when it went from 1 penny up to sort of 10p or something.
Oh my god.
But yeah.
When I was there, yeah, Leander as well. Something else that is good about it. You get subsidized. Now it's far less, and I think maybe the squad's bigger, but subsidized training camps, subsidized food. Sometimes people like used to live in there as well.
Yeah, I think I probably still hold the record for seeing how long I could hold on and living in the actual club.
I know, it's people like you, because when I was down there, I was trying to like stay in there for as long as possible, so because you don't pay rent when you're like living in
the crew dorm.
And they're like, so Jack, are you finding anywhere to live? And I was like, oh yeah, just right move. It's there's nothing out there right now, and yeah, people like you that have took the piss, and I had to go and find rent.
I think in my 3 years at Leander, if you totaled up my different stints in there, it would probably come to about 18 months actually living in it.
That's ridiculous.
Occasionally moving out into another flat or something like that. But I didn't have a lot of money. Never had a lot of money through my rowing career, and
yeah,
just had to do your best. Some people were fortunate enough to be funded by parents. I wasn't in that position.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate all Leander did for me. Actually, you talked about training camps as well. I think we went to, again, I think the club maybe just had a bit more money and fewer athletes back then to spread around, but we went on 3 camps to Banyulis in 1 year, and I think I paid no more than about £100 in total. So it was all very heavily subsidised, and without that I wouldn't have got the development I got while I was there. I had an absolute blast at Leander, brilliant time, really good group of guys, some of whom I still keep in touch with now. Never quite made the national team while I was there, which was disappointing. You think back and you're like, could I have done this differently, could I have done that differently, probably, but didn't quite make it. Won 2 Henley medals while I was there, the Thames Cup in 2007, and then straight after, a year after, in 2008, we won the Ladies' Plate, and then the year after that, we got knocked out of the Ladies' Plate in the semi-final, which was probably one of the best crews I ever rowed in, and just one of the regrets was we didn't convert that one, but that was a really good crew. We probably should have won that year as well, but that's racing. And then after 3 years at Leander, I was like, my brain's rotting a little bit here. I'm doing a lot of rowing, I'm having a lot of fun, but I'm not really moving on with life. And am I going to make the national team? Doesn't look like it. So actually, having not finished my first degree, I decided that I would go back and I need to get a degree, and I'll do it in something I'm interested in. My mum and dad, by this point, had actually moved to Northern Ireland, so I'm half Northern Irish. So I moved back in with them over in just south of Belfast.
That's right, I forgot you went back to Queen's.
And I went to Queen's University and studied politics. I didn't actually know if I was going to row or not, but at that time they were going through a little bit of a change, a bit of a revolution that's probably had a massive influence on my rowing career and certainly on my coaching career, in that Mark Fangan-Hall had just come in there the year before, and they'd really started to take off as a programme.
Yeah.
They were making sort of the latter stages of Henley Royal Regatta. They were doing really well at Bucks Regatta. They're actually one of the last crews, I think, in my time there to actually beat Oxford Brooks in Champ 8s at Bucks. I think Newcastle were more recent, but before that Queen's did it 2 years in a row, and then it's been all Brooks since then. So I had a brilliant time at Queen's.
What were they doing well there?
I think, again, we'll go back to this physiology. I think Mark was really good at I sort of realised I could train a little lighter but with higher volume and get more benefit out of it. So rather than
sitting down... And at Leander, were you not doing, I think from what I heard, it was like grip and rip.
Yeah, so at Leander we had on the wall, it was like, well, if you're going to make the national team for a 3x6k with 1 minute 30 rest, you're going to need to pull 147. Fine, well, that's a standard. So do you go in there and you pull 147 until it becomes easier, or do you start a little bit slower and work your way down? I think the second way is physiologically the way to do it, right? But the first way is the way that it was done. You'd sit down and you pull 147s, and eventually you actually got there, and that was the standard, and you had to get there. But at Queen's it was much more. We'd have a sort of VO2 max and step test early in the season. I'd be given our power zones. All the ergos were done on watts, they weren't done on splits. So I'd be given a specific wattage to hold for my UT2, 250, 260 watts, something like that. It was a bit more specific than that.
What is that in a split?
250.
Must be like a 150.
250 is about 150. It's not that quick, but I just found that maybe it was I was a bit more experienced when I was at Queen's. I turned up there when I was already sort of 24 or something like that. I had some good training behind me, but I just found that even though I wasn't full-time training anymore, like I had been at Leander, I was getting quicker, and that's when I finally started hitting better 5k PBs, 2k PBs. I really struggled at Leander to break 6, and then at Queen's I got it down to sort of 5:58 pretty quickly. Same with the 5k, down in the sort of low 1550s, through not doing full-time training, but just training a little bit more sensibly. I think the other thing is, I just calmed down a little bit as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes, like, I've had a good
This
coach.
is the calmer version of you, right?
Yeah. Yeah, this is the calm bit, yeah. So, like, I think sometimes you can want it too much, and you just, every session and every week, you're pouring everything into it, when actually you just need to chill and tick off the training a little bit more casually.
Yeah.
So I started doing that a little bit more at Queen's, and the other thing I learned to do at Queen's is I finally learned to actually scull at a reasonable pace. So I spent a lot more time on my single. So I had a great time there. I actually rode for Ireland at the World University Championships back in Hungary. When was that? 2010.
Okay.
So that was good fun. That was 6 from Queen's and 2 guys from UCD, and we went and got a bronze medal in the 8 behind GB and Estonia, I think it was.
Nice.
I think that's the only. I think there's some weird fact. I know it's only Fiji, but I think that's the only medal Ireland have ever had in an 8 at a World Championships or something like that.
There you go.
Obviously, they're doing really
Tell
well.
the O'Donovan brothers that.
Oh, yeah.
Settle down, guys.
I mean, they're obviously doing really well now with all the small boats and sculling and doing exceptionally well. But that was a really good time, and Mark had a really big influence on how I'd then go on to coach when I got to.
Yeah. What else did he influence? Was he the guy who said shape?
Yeah, there was a lot of shape, and actually a lot more in terms of, if we're talking about, so there was the physiology side of things, which was just a lot more considered than just, rip it, whatever it is. But also, I think shape actually probably came from Leander. The shape on the handle of the blade, we got a lot of that from, Chris Collerton was one of my coaches there. He was quite big on that. Mark was quite big on that. But I think what I thought from Mark was just that, the sort of patience around the back end. It's a big hot topic. I think even we've had that debate maybe online about how do we move the handle around the back end. And I know there's a lot of debate online about some people, get the hands moving out fast. Some people move with the speed of the boat. Some people have got a pause at the back end. But what I did notice is that, first time, I remember sitting at 8 for the first time, week 1 at Queen's, and we're like sitting at backstops and we're going rolling up, and I'm like halfway up the slide going, where is everybody? What are they doing? So it was a lot more patient around the back end. It was a lot nicer rhythm, I think. But I think Mark squeezed a lot of juice out of what he had at Queen's. There was nobody there that I would, and this is with all due respect, that were like exceptional athletes. I think I was certainly the only athlete that could break 6. And there wasn't that many under sort of 6'10". But we went really quite fast. We were sort of top 10 at the head of the river. They broke a barrier record in the Temple. I wasn't eligible at that time. Going sub 540 for 2k in the 8. And this is all with guys, probably with an average erg in the mid-16s, probably.
Really?
And I think it was just a lot more like sympathy on the hull, and I think it was that stuck with me a lot and probably influenced me from a technical perspective. So what Queen's did and just how they structured the program, I think it was really good. And also what I realised is how much training you can do as a student athlete.
Okay,
you can train quite a lot if you're disciplined and if you
avoid the beers.
Yeah.
Manage the beers.
Yeah, manage the social life.
Be sensible.
You can still have a social life, but it doesn't need to be as all-consuming as some people make it. And we were doing sort of 90, 100-minute ergos we were doing at Queen's in the morning, and that's a lot of training, but we did it as student athletes, and it made us fast. The miles make medals.
So that's a big increase in training volume. Did you notice anything different about, rather than just getting the zones right, writing on the program, anything else about that environment or what he created that, was motivating? Because even then that's quite, just say go into 100 minutes. Even if you have time, it's still kind of like, some people would say that's quite hard. It
is quite hard, but one of the other things they did there at Queen's was that every ergo was also on sliders, Concept 2 sliders.
Okay.
Just to, be more sympathetic on what you're doing, but also we're on linked sliders. So if you're doing 100 minutes and you're linked with 7 other guys, you kind of got to do it, haven't you? But there's and this is something I took forward into Edinburgh, there is sort of collectiveness of we're all doing this together and we'll all get through it. If you have to do 100 minutes and you're doing it by yourself, a lot of people can motivate themselves to do that, and a lot of people enjoy that. And go, and I quite enjoy just going sitting in the garage and knocking out a long ergo, but not everyone wants to do that. But if you've had a long day at university and you're tired and you've got 90 minutes on the ergo to do, and you turn up and I really don't want to do this, and you walk into the room and there's 50 other people there that are going to do it with you, suddenly becomes a lot easier. Like, you're doing it collectively and you're getting through it as a group. So it's one of the changes I tried to make when I got to Edinburgh. Is we had a really terrible ergo room when I first started there. Well, not terrible. There was only about sort of 20 ergos in it. It was kind of low ceilings. It was a little bit hot. But we couldn't have all the men and women training together. We'd have to split up the groups and all that sort of stuff. So one of the things I pushed for and we eventually got was a much bigger ergo space. So now we've got an ergo space that's got 50 ergs in it, so everyone can train at the same time. And I think it probably, you'd have to ask the athletes, but I think that just helps with exactly what I've said there.
Yeah.
You're coming in from a long
100%.
day. We're all in this together. We're all going to get through this together. I really don't want to do this session, but everyone else is doing it, and that'll get me through. So yeah, I took that from Queen's as well.
One thing you just said there, and actually one thing it reminded me of, was when you said that you pushed for to the university. So I guess that's like any coaches listening. Like, how do you go about like making your point for what you think is going to be best for like the club and the crew, to say, other people on a board or a committee, or like, your boss that is in charge of the person? Like, what was your way of going about justifying that investment from the university?
Yeah, it was a long process. So this was back in 2013. I started at Edinburgh, so just that's 11 years.
We're kind of jumping around here, but yeah, we can go back to maybe the GB stuff. But yeah.
No, that's all right. First of all, I was lucky in that the University of Edinburgh was really ambitious.
Yeah.
And I had a fantastic boss, director of sport, Jim Aitken, when I arrived, and he was really keen to invest in some sports and really push them on to improve the profile of sport at the University of Edinburgh, but also improve the profile of the university itself across the world. So I think they started off with a high performance swim program, and that's produced plenty of people who've medalled at Commonwealth Games, Paralympics, Olympians, I think, a few Olympic swimmers as well. And then rowing became one of them. I'm actually the second of the sort of professional coaches at Edinburgh. There was one coach before me who took a very different approach, came in, decided to work with a very small group of sort of 5 or 6 athletes and not work with the club as a whole. And didn't quite work, because I think it sort of alienated the wider club. The small group of athletes they had, whilst they were okay, didn't have that large training group to sort of push them on. So when that ended, they brought me in, and I said, well, I'm going to do this differently. If I'm going to make us a force in UK rowing, in world rowing, then I need control over how the whole structure works, how the whole club works. And I guess it was a case of success then, a little bit of success gave you enough credit to go back in the room and ask for something else.
Yeah.
So I came in, and the first thing I did was just put in place a really basic structure. It was as simple as, cool, if we're going to achieve these things, all you need to do is you need to do this kind of training, and you need to do it consistently. And we need to row with this pattern and execute it consistently. And that's it. And that got us from being really a little bit quite low down in the university rankings and probably not noticed, to suddenly being a lot more competitive. And when I had a little bit of success from that, it gave me the credit to then walk into the room with Jim and go, well, what's limiting us now is we don't have the right kind of boats, or we don't have enough boats to get bums on seats, so we need to invest in boats. And this is what this will do for us. And he was very good at taking an argument or taking a proposal and then backing you on it. And then we got that, and then we stepped up again, and that gave me credit to walk back in the room and say, okay, we're doing that, but if we want to move on to the next level, I need more gym space, I need more coaches. So I started off with just me. John Higson came in as the senior women's coach fairly quickly afterwards, like a matter of a month or two, I think. And then we expanded that, and now we're a team of 4 full-time. But that's just been a building process of, okay, we've done this, but what's next? If to move on, we need to invest in our land facilities, we need to invest in coaching, we need to invest in support structures, we need to invest in boats. Right now we're about to build our own boathouse again at Strathclyde Park, so buildings, so it's been a constant thing. 10 years ago, I always thought, oh, a couple of years we'll be in a place where it'll just run itself almost. But every time we've got somewhere, I've gone, well, what's next, and let's move on, and what do we need to do? One of my sort of philosophies of how do you act as a head of rowing or a director of rowing, the phrase I've always sort of looked back on is, what are the barriers to us achieving what we want to achieve, and then just systematically try and remove them. So what's stopping us achieving? So when we were there first, I was like, well, we don't have enough boats, so we need to invest in boats.
That's simple.
Let's get boats. We don't have enough erg space.
Just say for argument's sake, say it's a coach or a club member that's trying to improve a club, and maybe they don't have the ability to improve boats. So obviously, you're quite good at going into a club and seeing where the constraints are, and as you say, and systemize it. Like, how do you go about like figuring out where those constraints are? Like, what are you looking like? I guess it's kind of a broad topic, but like, what's your sort of thought process if you were to go, say you were to go into a random club in US or UK or whatever, and just like start to figure out like how to improve it? How would you do that? What would be the thought process behind that?
Well, I might contradict myself a little bit here because I've talked a little bit about facilities and boats, but there's plenty of examples of great clubs out there or great programs that don't have a lot of shiny boats, that don't have a really nice shiny boathouse. So how do you improve?
Clydesdale was like
exactly that. And there's some other, like there's some junior clubs down south that I think do a really good job. I remember seeing all the sort of social media stuff from like Hinksey. I love what they were doing. They had sort of a basement kind of ergo stuff, it was real kind of rocky stuff. And they were doing really well. They're doing some really good stuff, and they don't have like the all singing, all dancing, shiny boathouse. But the first thing you got to get right is the training. As long as you have the absolute basic needs, what the absolute basic needs for rowing is, you need to have some water, you need to have some boats. If you've got an ergo, great. If you've got some weights, even better.
Stirling Rowing Club or Stirling University Boat Club. Not Stirling. Stirling University. I remember they would go to Bucks, and they didn't own any boats or any oars, and they would walk around the boat park in the morning being like, you guys got a fork? And then they would get one, and then they were like, right, cool, let's go get some oars. We got a race in 45 minutes, and then off they'd go. So the
first time we went to, when British Championships was going through its phase of racing in October, which doesn't happen now, the first time we attended that, we didn't attend with any of our own boats. So we borrowed, Scottish Rowing had a fleet of old Yanniseks. Do you remember the old Yannies from Scottish Rowing?
I spent a lot of time in those,
So
I raced, it's good actually, I raced trials in Clydesdale's worst boat ever. So when I was coaching the juniors, and they're always, I don't want to go in that boat, Jack, it's horrible. I'm like, I raced trials in that boat that's friggin' falling apart. Like, get in.
So that's it. So you're asking, what's the first thing you do is make sure the training's right, because you don't need all this shiny stuff. I say the first British Champs we went to, we raced in all the Scottish Rowing Yanniseks. I think we picked up a couple of medals in like lightweight doubles and stuff like that, and we started to get a bit of success. And that gave me, again, that little bit of credit to walk back in the room of my boss and go, look, we're doing stuff. And so actually sometimes people now can look at us and go, well, you've just thrown a lot of money at Edinburgh, and that's where the success has come from.
That's what I used to think a little bit before I joined.
Let's dial it back to year one and go, well, we're racing in the Yanniseks, and then we got a couple of Wintec pairs, and that was great. But what turned it round, and that comes back to your first question there, is I just came in and got them training consistently in the right way, and that was it. And that can actually transform a squad straight away. And I think that it's the right way, and we can discuss what that might be, but I think the consistency word is the most important. You said that a few times. It's just knocking out consistent training, however many times per week, 8 to 10 times a week, 10 to 12 times a week, and just doing it week on week on week, and you will get success from that. You will sort of elevate yourself from where you are pretty quickly. Yes, and then what comes next? If we go back to what I said, what's next? Then you maybe need some slightly better equipment to support that, or you need some better gym equipment or you need some S&C equipment to start addressing that side of things. But I think if you just get people training in a reasonable way consistently, you're going to start seeing results pretty quickly, and then everything else is just a bonus on top of that, and you keep building from there. Sometimes, what frustrates me is sometimes I see some clubs will be raising money, and they'll maybe think, well, we're raising £25,000 to buy a new 8, and I'm like, well, are you going to get more benefit out of a decent second-hand M-Packer 8 when you don't have a coach?
Yeah.
Or could you take that £25,000 and maybe support a part-time coach that's going to give you good training, and you can still row in your 10-year-old Janusek 8. I bet you go faster with option 2 than option 1.
Yeah.
I think people like the sort of shiny thing
Yeah.
first up, but and obviously we're going to say this, we're coaches, but there's a lot more value to be had in coaching, but it's not as sexy as a nice shiny boat.
It's not a quick fix.
And just someone
who's
understands.
going to make you to train and do the stuff that you don't want to do, maybe in some ways.
And you don't even have to be like a great coach. I think you just have to understand putting in place a structure that people will then commit to. And actually, if I go back to my interview at Edinburgh, I remember they asked me, they were like, well, how are you going to make this, how are you going to keep the athletes engaged, and how are you going to get them, excited and make it fun? Yeah, and that was it. And I was like, well, I'm going to show them improvement. I'm going to show them improvement, and maybe that improvement will then lead to some success. If that's in the form of winning some medals, then brilliant. And I think I'm aware that some other people went into that interview just from feedback I've had, and they're like, well, we'll have social evenings and we'll have barbecues and stuff like that. And that wasn't. I was like, I'm going to come in here, and these are ambitious people.
Yeah.
So the great thing about working at Edinburgh is, and any perhaps university program, is that the people that walk in the door are already pretty motivated and pretty high achievers, or they wouldn't have got there in the first place. It's pretty hard to get into Edinburgh University. So they want to work hard, and they want to achieve something, and they want to see success, and they want to see improvement. So if you can show them that, and all I need is for them to buy in for long enough into the program to see the benefits of it, because you're not going to see it straight away.
Yeah.
I was like, look, just buy in and trust the process, and we'll see some speed gains, and then that'll just roll on from there, and people will go, oh yeah, it does work, and this is worth it, and then everything just kind of snowballed from there. So
yeah, okay. And then you just one thing you said there was just getting them to buy in. So like before you've had the results, I think that's quite a hard point. And you so say I was like a university student, I signed up, I've kind of like the direction isn't exactly clear, and I had been doing some easy training before. Like what would you say to someone to be like, this is what is going to work and this is why you should do it?
Well, now it's probably evidence based in that there's enough. I think students are intelligent enough now, and the amount of information that's available.
They probably follow really good Instagram accounts.
They probably follow really good Instagram
really
accounts.
Smart
they might
Instagram.
even follow yours as well.
Yeah, I was waiting for that actually.
You walked into that one.
Yeah.
So there's plenty of information out there about how to train and how to train properly, and I think people are buying into that a little bit more.
Yeah.
I think also it was harder probably for me at the start because there was no sort of history.
Yeah.
There was no recent history to the program to say this program works.
That's
fresh in.
Yeah.
But now if you turn up at us, or if you go to Durham or Newcastle or Oxford Brookes, you're walking in the door there and you're going, well, these guys are going fast last year and the year before and the year before that, so what they do probably works. So, I'll buy into that. If you're walking into Edinburgh in 2013, there probably wasn't the background to go, well, I'm going to trust this guy because I've seen what they've been doing over the last few years. There was nothing there. I think because it was new and I was new and it was fresh, I think you probably get a window of opportunity where people were going to go, well, let's see how this goes.
Yeah, that's
and then
true.
If it works, it works. So I knew I had a little bit of free time effectively to go, well, I'm going to get 3, 4, 5 months here where people hopefully buy into it, and then if we start seeing results, start seeing improvement, then people will understand that it works. But if I get that wrong, then the whole thing might go a little bit backwards. Thankfully, it was the former. People bought in, and I'm very thankful to that. I'm still very fond memories of that kind of first, second year, and of the students we had through then.
Mm-hmm.
Again, no real superstars. A lot of it coming out of our beginner program at Edinburgh. In fact, a lot of the students we have now come out of our beginner program at Edinburgh. We're really proud of that. But a lot of just sort of raw people that probably didn't know an awful lot about rowing or the sport. So I'm really, really pleased. I think one of the phrases I said back then, I said it at one of the early sort of dinners. I was giving a speech or something, and I was like, we're going to step off a cliff. I'm going to trust you to step off the cliff with me here. Because we don't know what's down there. Let's just step off and have some trust. Yeah. Sounds a bit cheesy now, but I'm so pleased that they did that, because it was their success that then allowed me to go and build further success. So everything we've done now is built on the shoulders of the guys back then. getting the momentum going in the program, and then the momentum just built and built and built over the next sort of 5-6 years. So it's been really exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. No, it's a bit of pressure as well at that phase. I don't know, was that so when you came from, and like I don't know, like what was that like dealing with that?
I didn't feel like a lot of pressure externally back then. I think when you go into any, it's like going into any, I guess if you went to any coaching job now, do you want to go into a program that's absolutely flying, because then you've got pressure on you to just maintain that?
Yeah.
Or do you want to go into a program where it's a bit of a blank sheet of paper and there's not a lot of pressure? Any results were going to be a level of improvement. So so there wasn't pressure from that. There was pressure from me because I always had a little bit of self-doubt as to, am I actually any good at this? I don't really know.
I think you always need a bit of that. I think
you always,
because you just don't. I think if you're the opposite. That was one thing I always said, is I'm always listening to, like when I was a row, I was always listening to what are the good coaches saying, what are the bad ones saying. And consistently I noticed the good ones saying, I think it's this, I think it's that, you know, it might be this, it might be that. And then the worst coaches were the ones who are like, it's exactly this because of this and because of that. And it's just, I think you need the art of coaching, you need that flexibility and adaptability, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I didn't feel a huge amount of sort of external pressure at the time, which was credit to my boss. Once we started spending reasonable large amounts of money, of the university's money on boats and things, I was like, okay, we need to back this up now. But thankfully it kept going. But
awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So what do you do? Like you were saying, just get someone to do a consistent program.
Yeah.
So I think I remember when I first joined Edinburgh, I was surprised actually at how little it was at the start. I know that I was like, what the fuck's this? I was just like, oh, okay, cool, like let's do this then. Like talk us through like how do you go about building a consistent program?
I guess, I mean, what does our program look like? Our program probably looks like a lot of other university programs. The volume isn't particularly high because what you've got to start, the starting point is these are student athletes, they're not full-time athletes.
Yeah.
So I go, well, what time do we have to work with? We don't have any training that can be between the hours of sort of 9 and 5 because they're in lectures. So there's our gaps there. We've got this water time with us. It's like a Wednesday afternoon, Saturday morning double session, Sunday morning double session.
Yeah, not much.
No, five sessions on the week, 5 sessions on the water during the week usually.
Are you not doing Sundays off anymore?
Not at the moment, no. So we do during, so we don't during term time, but when they're out of term time, we switch to a Sunday off and we do like a Friday, Saturday on the water because Fridays are a lot quieter at Strathclyde Park than Saturdays and Sundays are.
Yeah, cool. Okay.
But it's just building consistent volume within you got to look at the restrictions that are on you, which are time pressed, and we don't ask people to miss anything academically because that's their primary goal. So I go, right, these are the time blocks I have, these are the facilities I have, what can I put in there that will get the maximum output for what we're trying to achieve. And then the next question is, and I guess we discussed this just before we started, is what are we trying to achieve? So what does the university want, what do I want as a coach, but probably more importantly, what do the athletes want to achieve out of this year? And I like to kind of make a contract with the athletes. And I was like, well, what do you want to achieve? And they go, well, I want to win the Henley Royal Regatta. Cool. This is what it's going to take. There's probably a minimum level of training that is going to take. So that's the cost. Are you willing to pay that cost to get that outcome? And if there's a reality gap there, then you've got a bit of a problem.
Yeah, that's what Ricky, the first coach that made a big difference to me, he said. He was like, it was like, I said I wanted to go to the Olympics. So he's like, okay, here's the training you need to do. And within 4 weeks, I wasn't doing the training. And he just pulled me up and he was like, okay, cool, like, we need another goal because, like, you don't want to do the training. And I was just like, the way he phrased it like that, I was like, fuck, damn, I do want to do it, I promise. So, like, just, reframing it, it's like just making it clear that I'm not telling you to do this because I want you to do this training. I'm telling you to do this training because it's the training that gets you what you want. So... Well,
the other way of sort of phrasing it with the athletes, and I've said this to them in the past, is I say, if you do everything I ask of you, and you don't get the result or the performance gains that you want, then okay, I'll put that on me.
Yeah.
But if you don't do everything I ask, then that's on you.
Yeah.
And that's quite a simple contract to have. But it's got to be a level of realism in there, and it's great to have the ambition of, right, let's go to the Olympics or something. For some people, that's just, I know there's a lot of phrases out there, you can do anything you want to. Well, there's a very small number of people that can actually go to the Olympics that have that sort of physiological ability, I think. But you just got to have a little bit of realism there. But
Henley win is definitely for a lot of rowers.
Yeah, and then the other thing I've sort of learned at Edinburgh over my time there is try and not. You can judge an athlete quite quickly, and actually I think sometimes you can do it unfairly. You can go, I can judge an athlete in the first few weeks of training. You're looking at, general, size. What are they pulling on the ergo? What weights are they lifting? What do they look like in the boat? And I'm going, I'm not sure that person's going to make it, or they're going to be good enough for this particular level. And then people have surprised me in the past. They really have. Just with consistent work, you can actually move yourself onto really quite a high level. So I'm not contradicting myself. You might not be an Olympian, but you could be a Henley winner. You
100%,
could, you could represent your country at home internationals or something, or do some really good stuff. And I think I've tried to judge people less, because some people have really surprised me in the past. I don't know if I should be name checking too many people, but James Temple's an excellent example. Yeah,
100%. So when I'm coaching, I use him as an example all the time.
So he was great. He came in and he wasn't a bad athlete at all, but he I think spent his first year in our second day or something, and then he just kept consistently working, and then he wanted to do more and more, and he did lots of high volume, and he just kept working.
That's an understatement, I think.
Yeah, the guy just he surprised. He ended up being one of our guys that won Henley. And he ended up being the GB lightweight single sculler, and he went to under 23 world championships.
6'11" 2K.
Yeah, 6'11" 2K at 72 kilos or something like that.
Yeah.
So did I judge him back when he first arrived? Probably did. Probably went, oh, that guy, he'll be all right. Sit in the bow seat the second day or something. But so I've tried to sort of keep those in mind. The other one, actually, from my rowing experience, I remember being at when I was at Leander, and obviously everyone there is like reasonably good, but some you're like, oh, that guy's exceptional, he's going to go off the Olympics. But I remember actually I was in crews with Will Satch back in the days, and Will was good, but I'd never would you have said to me, right, that guy's going to stroke the 8 to Olympic gold in 2016 when he first arrived in 2006, 2007. He was like final year at Shiplake or something, and I wouldn't have had him down as like, this guy's going to be 2-time Olympic medalist, Olympic champion, world champion, this, that, and the other, and he turned into a phenomenal athlete. So don't judge athletes too early. It's one thing I'm trying to keep at the back of my mind.
Yeah. No, I definitely even just at the Olympics. I remember seeing a couple people who won medals and stuff like that. I remember because I was competing with them, or they're maybe in a different category, and I was watching them climb the rankings, and you kind of just you rank, or at least I do, anyways. Well, not that I mean to, but rank people, and they look like they'll make, and sure enough, 2-3 people who I'm like, there's no way.
One of your own coaches and one of my good mates, Al Sinclair. He's a great example. So me and Al rode together for 3 years in Aberdeen, and then we rode together at Leander. And back when and Al probably wouldn't mind me saying this, when we first started rowing together at Aberdeen, physically I was like miles ahead of him, and if we ever did seat racing or something, I'd beat him in sweet boats, certainly. But Al just always had a really good technical form. I mean, I remember in Aberdeen, I think he maybe just scraped under 630 back in those days.
I think I know when he was 19 he had a 640. Yeah. And then when he was 35, he was 550.
Yeah, and I had the pleasure, he did that during his PB during COVID.
Yeah, that's right.
I was helping him out a little bit when he was still in the squad, and I went up and watched him do that 550 in his parents' shed up in Inverness during COVID, and I was like, this guy's come a long way.
Sleeping out,
So, and that was just really good, consistent work over a number of years, layered on top of each other, really good motivation, and he ended up being, fourth at the Olympics is nothing to be sniffed at. So it just shows you, again, would you have said if you'd got someone to come in and watch, our group of training athletes in Aberdeen back in 2003 or 4, and you said, which of these guys are going to the Olympics, you probably would have picked up Al, but he was the one who did it, and he was exceptional. So, I find that so interesting. It's what is it that those people
do that has that gives them that success. And I remember when I came into your program, and I think like your structure at least definitely gave you the option and gave you the plan to like just do this and show up every week and improve. I think 100% one thing in your group that was intangible was the weekly percentages. Like just 3x2K, whatever, 4x2K or whatever, like 2-3Ks, and comparing yourself every week. And that was something I showed up the first time we did 3x2K. I would never forget, like Josh and Gavin, my God, I think Gavin beat me on the last 2K by like 30 seconds or something. And I was like, holy shit. I'm like, really had that doubt. But, and again, I had my own issues with how I was training. I was being inconsistent. I'd make up excuses. I remember, I don't know if you ever remember, but sometimes I'd come up to you and just make up a bullshit excuse. Like, Colin, I feel a bit sick. I gotta go in. And you'd be like, okay. You'd just be like, whatever. You'd be like, in you go. So it was kind of like in the same way you're like, that contract, it's like, that's fine, go in if you want. And sure enough, the more I did that, the more I stayed where I was. And then gradually I started to notice, and I see some people move up, and I'll be like, oh, what they're doing, what are they doing, like JT, oh, they're showing up every week, they're doing all the training, they're doing all the pieces. And then I started to do that, surprisingly started to climb the ranking as well.
So it's one of my favourite parts of our programme is the timed work. It's one of the great advantages training on a 2K lake as well, as you get that opportunity to really consistent water and consistent over the years as well. So we're still running the sort of regular 3x2Ks on a Saturdays, pretty regular, alternating weeks.
There must be a record or something like that.
We were looking at it the other day. Actually, the records we're most interested in is our 3.8K time trial. So the up and back. So start under the bridge, race up, 100 meters from the top, timers off. You get your turn,
especially this time of year,
race back down again. So we're doing that sort of every second week. And the great thing is we've now got history of that going back sort of 6, 8, 10 years.
So many different weather conditions.
And there's so many different factors, but you start to understand what's a good time and what's not a good time and where people should be. And that's really encouraging for some of the young athletes we've got right now. So we were looking at the other day, well, so-and-so is doing this right now. Well, what were those guys doing back in the day? And we went back and we looked at some of the fastest times ever produced over the 3.8 for heavyweights, lightweights, women's heavyweights, women's lightweights, etc. And we just sort of
who had the highest? Maddie or Josh?
The fastest ever on time was Josh Armstrong back in about 2017, 2018. Can't remember.
Yeah, that's annoying.
He just absolutely smashed it.
Yeah, he was annoying. Yeah.
Gav Horsburgh, very quick as well. But actually, Dale, currently men's
highest percentage.
As a lightweight men, I think Dale and Gav are pretty close. I need to look up Maddie's one. Obviously, but Lucy Glover put in a couple of quick ones as well. Dale was right up there. I think he's a second off the record as well. So now he's Coach Dale, but
Coach Dale. That gives him some authority then.
But it's encouraging because then you can see that when we're getting boats that are performing at a decent level, and you go back and you go, well, that guy came that guy was doing that in late October, and he ended up coming sort of top 10 at the first November trial.
Yeah.
So you're probably in a good place, and the numbers the standard creeps up, but it doesn't jump up.
Yeah.
So if we know people are around those numbers, we know they're going all right. And the great thing is that's for trials, but obviously we've got a lot of people doing the time trials in small boats and bigger boats that aren't going to trials. But we go, well, if you're 0.5% behind this person, then they're doing really well at trials. That we know that the squad's in good shape. Although John and I joke sometimes, like we actually had a really good time trial just this Sunday past, and there was one or two standouts, but they weren't like sort of miles ahead. But there was a really good grouping, so all the way down, like the percentages were really tight. And John and I always get a little bit nervous when we see that, because we're like, either everybody's going well or everybody's shit. So hopefully it's the former.
What have you noticed then in terms of a group?
Yeah.
What's the sign if you aren't able to go back and look at the data and compare? Like, what's the sign of a competitive group and a not? Like, you'd think maybe being closer is a better sign, or have you ever had it where everybody's really close and you still don't perform well?
Yeah, well, that's interesting because that sort of leads into some of the debate we had this summer. So we've changed the way Edinburgh are running this year, in that we're running with a slightly smaller squad. So last year, at the start of the year, we had 45, 46 men. It was just too many. And sort of up in the low to mid 30s for the women as well. And what we ended up seeing is, if you look at Henley Royal Regatta, we had, apart from maybe Oxford Brookes, we probably had the biggest sort of participation from a university perspective.
Oh, really?
Don't entirely quote me on that. But we had like 3 women's 8s in the island, and that was, nobody else managed that. And that was brilliant. We had three women's 8s racing at Henley Royal Regatta student event. We had 2 men's 8s made it into the temple for men, and then we had 2 Cox 4s made it into the Prince Albert for, did we? Yeah, 2 in the Prince Albert as well. So we had a huge number of athletes make it into the regatta. So depth-wise, you're looking, well, that's great. But, you know, by Thursday morning, we're done. I think it was Thursday or Friday, all done. So we sort of reflected, is that success or is that not success? Is getting a lot of people to a good-ish level what we're trying to do, or we're trying to get a slightly smaller number of people to a really good level?
Yeah.
And actually that decision is partly mine, but it's also come a little bit from the university, is that they want us to perform at a higher level. So they're like, they want world-class sporting programs at the University of Edinburgh. And they're investing in the coaching team and the facilities they want to see athletes from Edinburgh go to Olympic Games and World Championships.
Now you've had, has it been 3 in total that you've had go to the Olympics? So, Maddie, was she the first? Polly technically?
Yeah, so in my actual time here, so Polly Swan had obviously gone to Rio in the 8 and got silver, but she wasn't, like, she hadn't sort of been part of our programme. She'd been at down south at Caversham. But then she came back to finish her degree, so she came back into the programme, which was a really good influence, getting Olympic medalists come back in. It was brilliant.
There was a really good group then.
Yeah, a really good group, and that's when Lucy had just started with us as well as an undergraduate, Lucy Glover, so she had this, you know, other athlete to look up to as well, so that was brilliant. So then, obviously, Polly then went on and made Tokyo. Lucy made Tokyo, Lucy Glover in the quad, and Maddie was the lightweight women's spare, so we had 3 in Tokyo. And then just in Paris, obviously Ollie Wilkes. So Ollie Wilkes, he, you know, he'd started rowing at Liverpool. I think he'd either done 1 year or 2 years at Liverpool. Can't quite remember. So he came to us. He was still pretty raw. But
what is it, like that army saying, like, born in Blackpool, but made in the Royal Navy?
Something like that.
Something made in the Edinburgh.
Yeah, but you're all part of, like, everyone, you know, a lot of people have clubs and everyone contributes something that's quite important to your development. And, you know, Liverpool gave him his start in the sport. I think we then got him and got, right, let's take you up to the next level. So we, you know, got him trialling. He got his first ever GB vest when he was with us in the Cox 4 in 2017 in Plovdiv. And he got a silver medal there. And then the following year, after he graduated from his masters, he went down to Oxford Brookes. And then Oxford Brookes took him that next step again. So I think everyone's part of, like, the coaching journey. So, so obviously Ollie got.
I was so fired up about that one because I remember having a chat with him when I was down picking up all my shit from after I retired or quit or whatever, and he was like having a bad time, I think, in Caversham. I'm sure he won't mind me saying, but he was like, I think he was on the precipice, like, you know, when I get cut, you know, didn't get selected for these 4s, like. And I remember I see it in his eyes, and he's like, yeah, I think, like, I'm done. And I was like, you'll know when you know, you know, like, and I was so pumped to see him go off and do that. That was like I think my favorite thing from the Olympics. But yeah,
that was great to see. Really enjoyed seeing him sort of, as you say, sort of putting that sort of full stop on the rowing career and doing an Olympic medal is fantastic. And, you know, the Olympic medal is great, but he's also going out as a world and European champion as well. So there's a, you know, really good history there, and we enjoyed having him. And that, you know, that was probably one of our best periods at Edinburgh when he was around. We had when you were around. Yeah. We had some really good athletes back then.
Yeah.
So I remember that time pretty fondly. But it was good to see him finish that off this summer. I mean, finish it off. I assume he's finished. But
that's
his decision. We'll wait with bated breath.
Yeah.
So we've had 4 people go to the Olympics in our time this year. What's great about that is they all come slightly different routes as well. And that's what I like about Edinburgh, is that you can, I always say, and it sounds like a neat strapline, but we can back it up with evidence, is you can turn up never having rowed before. You can turn up as a talented junior, or you can
true.
come back into it having
A
done something.
25-year-old, when I came in, I was like 25, or something like that, from a random club,
Something like, I think our strongest thing, and I'll shout out here to Mike Hughes, our beginner coach, and some of the beginner coaches that have gone before him. One of our strengths has been our beginner program. So we've had one Henley win, hopefully backing it up soon is the plan, but and the Cox 4 back in 2016, but 2 of those 4 guys came out of the beginner program. They'd never rowed before they came to Edinburgh. T.E.R.P as well. Both of them went on to row at GB under 23 and FISU level as well and get medals there. I think I was trying to count up how many sort of GB vests we've had in the sort of 11 years I've been here. I need to sort of redo it because it keeps going up, but it's somewhere between 60 and 70 GB sort of vests. Not individual athletes, but in terms of vests. And that's across about 20 athletes across under 23 and senior level. And at least 5 or 6 of those have come out of the beginner program as well, which we're really proud of because we're not just taking some star junior athlete and then giving them a bit more and sending them on. We're teaching them from scratch, and we're really proud of that. Last year's men's first eight had at least 1 or 2 former beginners in it. The women's squad, it's actually a slightly higher proportion of athletes. Some of our top performing athletes right now have come out of the beginner program as well. Yeah. It probably goes back to what we're saying. I think your first coach is hugely influential, and we've got one of the best first coaches in the country. Well, I'm not going to say one of, he is the best first coach in the country. And they feed into our program. We try and then take them on again. So we're really proud of that. And when they get all the way to the Olympics, that's pretty special.
Okay. So and when you're talking a little bit before about not judging or not making up your mind about someone's potential early on. What have you seen as a coach who's seen all these vests? What have you seen kind of the common traits, and maybe the development as well? Seeing someone come through as a beginner, what's the sort of transformation look like, and what does it take in an athlete? From the coach's perspective to have that progress?
So if you'd asked me this a few years ago, I'd go all on the sort of physical numbers. You'd look at the anthropometrics, right? How tall are they? What's their wingspan? What's their VO2 max? What's their 2K score, 5K score? That's going to tell me whether this athlete's going to make it or not.
And what would you say that would be? Just for argument's sake, what would you?
What for making it?
Yeah.
In terms of making GB level, or?
Yeah, I guess GB level. Coming from, if they came into university. Yeah. Physically back then, what would you have said? Because I'm sure people always like to know the numbers. So.
Yeah, it's we had to.
Maybe against your point, because if you're saying that's wrong now.
Yeah, well, I'm about to say it is wrong in a way, but if you're looking for numbers, we've had some people make GB under 23 level. As a male, you're highly unlikely to be getting on the under 23 team if you're not under 6'10". Okay, yeah. And I think that's at the lower end of things.
It's definitely moved on.
I think it's moved on.
Definitely moved.
I think it probably needs to start with a 5 these days. Yeah. You can get some really talented rowers that can do it slightly lower than that, but we're looking at people. You need to be hitting sort of comfortably sub 6'10" and probably sub 6 to be knocking on the door. And on the women's side, I think it's very similar. I think you need to be sub 7 and even pushing towards 650 now. Mm-hmm. But again, there's always going to be examples of people who've done that who've not got those scores, but they're more the exception these days. Lightweights, I mean, it's probably not as relevant now because lightweight rowing has sadly sort of died a death a little bit. But you'd need to have been sub 620 as a male. Okay. And sort of sub 715, sub 710 as a female to make the under 23 team, and then sort of take 5 or 6 seconds off that to start knocking on the door of the senior level. Mm-hmm.
But then, I guess to your point, James Temple, for example, he came in. He was around
6:38, I think, off the top of my head. And then ended up at 6:11. But other example, Graham Ord came in at 6:50 odd. Yeah. He went to under 23s in the pair, pulling 6:05. So, but that's probably where it's at now. You need to be around 6 for men and 7 for women, just as a guideline to make the under 23 team. As you say, it's creeping up every year. I said my last
one year there was 30 people. I remember when I started, if you broke sub 6, you're stroking the 4 at the Olympics. And it's now it's you're sub 6, you're not in the top 30.
So I think my last ever
At trials, at GB trials. This is.
My last November trial as an athlete was back in sort of 2012 or 13 or something like that. And obviously did a 2K ergo on the Saturday. I pulled my PB there. I did a 5:58 point something, 0.3, 0.4, and that put me about 5th. Yeah, 5:58 now would put you 25th.
Yeah,
like it's just moved on so much.
That's crazy.
But that's great. The sport's moved on. I think people's understanding of physiology has moved on. So the standards have moved on.
It'd be interesting to see like to categorize like what training is, how has it changed, and have it all laid out, and say like if you could see like the average volume across the clubs or something like that. But I guess you'd take a lot of effort to pull that together. But
but I think people are getting more training's always moving on, and people are getting more clued up on the sports science behind things, and our understanding of how to train gets better. Our understanding of how to recover gets better.
Yeah.
And standards, shift all the time. If people raise the bar, then people sort of move on to hit that bar as well.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that internally as well. The standards just to do well at domestic events now has probably gone up quite considerably as well. Like I don't think we think if you're going to win the things we want to win at domestic level, we'd really love to win the men's and women's eights at Henley Royal Regatta for students, so the Island and the Temple. And we think for men, we're probably going to need a top 8 that's minimum sort of hitting a 605
average,
605 2K average. We reckon if we're going to get the kind of power output we need to compete.
Yeah.
And on the women's side, it's probably going to need to be the right side of 7, around about that 7-minute mark or 6:55. So it has moved on quite a lot. But if you look at the speeds on the water, I think standards.
Global warming's increasing the water speed.
Yeah,
that's not fair.
Yeah, that'll be
back in your day.
But yeah, everything's moving on, so we've got to move with it. And more people are investing more in coaching and facilities as well. If you just look at back when I was student rowing, I'm not sure there was any professional coaches in Scotland at all. And now we've got professional coaches at least 4 of the universities here, and bigger teams than that. And then down south, you're going to have far more than that. So there's big coaching teams and big investment facilities and things like telemetry, and the sport's moving on massively. So it's no real surprise that speed's moving on with it.
Yeah. No. Cool. Okay, and then you're saying that's the wrong thing to do.
It's not necessarily the wrong thing to do, but
give you an idea. Yeah.
So
don't make it a be all end all.
Again, I was discussing with our coaching team. What is it? So we now run at Edinburgh. When you turn up at Edinburgh, just to manage the numbers and make sure we can actually get some level of decent sort of coach to athlete ratio, we've had to bring in effectively a trials week. So in week 3 or week 4 of the semester, we run a trial. So we have a 2K ergo. And then we do some work on the water. We do some small boats, time trials, and then we do some big boat time trials with telemetry on the boat as well. So we get a really good sort of overall picture of where an athlete's at. And then we take all that information and we look at their physical standards and potential. We look at their sort of rowing history. We look at their outputs on the water, and then we select 20 men and 20 women. I think it's actually 21 and 22 this year, but around about that, and then we move forward with that. But one of the things that the intangible thing is mindset.
Yeah.
Because what I've seen, this is what I've learned over 10 years, is you can have this is where I go back to don't judge athletes. Some athletes with a fantastic mindset and work ethic can overcome some of those other metrics. So you've got to watch out for them. But equally, you get it the other way around. You get the talented athlete who's got really great physiology, who can shift a boat, but they just don't want to put the work in. And we know some of these athletes. All the talent and ability in the world, but they don't back it up because they don't have the mindset to do the training consistently, and it can be really boring. It can be a bit of a drag, 10, 12 sessions a week for 45 weeks of the year for 4, 5, 6 years, end on end, which is what you need to do to get to that top level. So we're like, well, we need to get better at looking at mindset, but how you can't. The other things you can put a number on, so that's really easy.
Yeah, we're trying to do that right now, but
But how do we assess mindset? I don't actually have the answer, but that's the question that we posed, and that we wish we could have more of a metric for, because that would help with our selection. I actually remember, this is a very crude way of doing it. I remember back at Leander, they had No.
Yeah.
So remember they had, you were obviously GB Start, but they had the Sporting Giants program. Do you remember the Sporting Giants
I heard
program?
of that,
It's kind of like, it was a little bit like Start, but not the same thing. I think that was post-London. No, it wasn't. It was way before that. But Ben Lewis, who was one of my former coaches, he was sort of tasked with looking at these Sporting Giants guys at Leander. And I remember one of the sessions he gave them was they had to run from Leander up to the top lock and run back again.
Top block.
You know, at the lock at the bottom of the Henry stretch.
Okay, right.
So
Okay,
yeah, it's a standard run from Leander
Yeah.
up to the lock, back down again. And I think I remember him saying he's not necessarily looking for the guy who comes first, but the guy who comes over the line and just collapses in a heap. So you're looking at, you know, are they willing to put themselves in a bit of a hole? And that's kind of a crude way of looking at it, but that's what I'm driving at is how do you put a sort of metric on people's ability and willingness to work and willingness to endure the work.
Well, could you do like heart rate, like testing, like?
I don't know. I think it's
like,
more. It's a mentality thing. And I think
yeah.
the best way is actually just chatting to people and seeing, you know.
Yeah, sorry. We're gonna end this. Come on. We're filming a podcast. Do you think someone will notice that? Okay, no worries. Do you think we got that on film?
I'm sure.
Yeah, chill. What's it even for? Chill. Okay, cool. Chill.
Okay.
Fine.
You're a good guard dog.
Yeah,
Yes, you
it's
are.
too good.
You sit there.
Thank you. That's what you're meant to do. You're supposed to comfort them and be like,
Well
it's
done.
okay, thank you.
Well
'Cause
done.
if you get angry, apparently they freak out more.
Yes.
So I'm worried that my neighbors hear me like petting him and being like, good boy, and they're like, why is he encouraging that dog to do that more? But anyways, okay, chill. All right, where were we?
I don't know. I think we're talking about mindset.
Mindset, and assessing
over and above,
mindset,
or as well as.
Because I would say if it was me, I do think that my mindset got a lot better. But like one of my weak areas was pushing myself for a long time. So that's another problem is you could have someone who wants it a lot, but they just don't know how to push themselves.
Yeah.
And train consistently. So it was something that I learned to do over time is how to push and how to train consistently.
Yeah.
So it's so tricky.
And that's your job as a coach. If people got the right mindset, what is our job is to provide the environment for people to train, give them some guidance, but then it's over to them. What's the phrase I use? You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, right? They've got to do that themselves. Or sometimes I say to guys, I can't do this for you. I can't get in the boat and pull for you. You're gonna have to do it yourselves. So you just try and set up, give them guidance, give them a program, but then they got to run with it, and that's over to you. So
but then like laying it out in that way, I think it's as we said, is a really good way to do it, where you make that clear. And I think that was obvious to me when I got there. It's like your decision to how far up the ranks you want to climb. You just learn through the results that you get. I think it's very clear of like input and output with that approach. So, what was it? What were some of the kind of common traits that you noticed amongst the rowers in your group, or what advice would you give to rowers who are looking to get to that competitive end of the sport, or just get as fast as they possibly can? Like,
probably it's about perfect execution of the basics. So that was something that. So I think as a coach, you're a product of all the coaches and athletes you've rowed with over your own career, or I certainly feel I am. I've had lots of good coaches through my time at various different clubs and universities, and you take sort of good bits out of it, and then you sort of add them into your own sort of coaching repertoire. But one of the things that stuck with me was if you execute the basic rowing pattern perfectly, you're probably going to beat 95% of people out there. So don't overcomplicate it, well, yeah, I mean, here we could get into all sorts of debates about what does the rowing pattern look like, but And it's going to vary a little bit between different coaches because different coaches have a different style, but I think we probably share a fairly similar one, is that I'm quite big on blade work and how we're managing the spoon.
Just copied that from you.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, but I've taken that from other coaches that I've been coached by, but I like to have a really simple, what I call quiet style. It's not kind of bashy and loud and aggressive. It's quite smooth, it's quite well separated, there's lots of shape on the handle around the back end to make sure that you're carrying a clean spoon. I like to make sure that another good coach that I had in the past said, get all the complicated stuff done by quarter slide. And by the complicated stuff, they meant get the handle sorted, get your body sorted, get the spoon sorted by quarter slide in the recovery, because then that makes the next 3/4 of the recovery really simple. And all that leads to having a really good platform that you can place the spoon correctly around the front end. And I think that can be the difference between fast drawers and really fast drawers, is that placement around the front end. So you've got to set up well in order to be in the right position, but then if you can place the blade well and engage well, then that's half the battle straight away.
I think the real good side to that as well is it's super coachable. Like you can, instead of just being, right guys, we're going to go out and improve our catch slip, or we're going to work on our sequencing of the force curve or some shit like that. Like you can be like, do this, do that, square here. And it's something I guess you can get everybody, because like having listened to lots of good crews talk, it's never like, we then think about the catch, we think about the finish, and we think about the draw, and we think about, it's like we're all on the same page with these 2 or 3 super simple things.
I think we touched on it earlier about explaining things to people, about sessions and things like that. I think it's really important to explain why we do things. Because so I like quite an early square on the blade, and I like lots of shape, but athletes will challenge you, and I don't mind athletes challenging as long as they then understand the explanation that comes back. They go, well, why would I make lots of shape? Or why would I square early? You're going to get wind resistance, all this kind of stuff.
Sorry, I'm just
It's probably all the arguments you gave me back when you started.
I don't know if I ever do that? Did I ever argue? I don't know.
Maybe, I don't know. But you bought into it at the end anyway. So.
I'm just trying to think of like some new start like complaining to you about something you guys get. It's just funny to imagine.
It still happens a lot, and people are resistant to it, and that's fine. But as long as you've got to be able to explain why to people. To explain why the motivation.
This is why you should. This is why you should shut up and listen to me.
And sometimes you need to. The thing that an athlete won't like is sometimes you'll slow them down before they speed up. Or you'll make them less 100%. Comfortable before they're comfortable. And that's going to happen with change. People are too. You're asking about what do you look for traits in an athlete? Is people who are willing to buy into a drill or buy into a technique and really go for it. And you can see that out on the water. If you're telling an athlete, right, and we're going to really exaggerate shape on early square, and you see some sort of tentatively going for it. And you see other athletes that really go for it, and obviously way too far the other way, and you're like, well, that's 100%. Great because they're willing to make that change. I was on I won't name names on this one, but I was on a GB training camp out in Aviz a couple of years ago when I was with the lightweights, and the heavyweights were out as well, and they were trying some different drills, and there was a couple of athletes who you couldn't actually tell whether they were doing the drill or not. And then there was one athlete that really stood out that was just like really going for it, and I was like, that's brilliant, that athlete. It was an athlete that had come through the start program, and I was just like, I was really impressed. And then one of the coaches asked me later in the evening, who sort of look, what was your opinion on that session? And that was my feedback on that, was like, you can see the athletes that go, okay, I'm going to try that, and then they really go for it and they buy into it, and I like that, because it might not work, but if it doesn't work, then we'll maybe move on to something else.
That's one thing. I 100% totally agree with that. And I think it comes down to like being in the moment and not being able to get totally absorbed into like what is the change that you're trying to do, and like just totally being focused on like square earlier. And I think a lot of the time the problem people have with that is the fear of, well, it's going to make my rowing feel like shit, so like rowing feeling good is the top priority, and if anything gets in the way of it feeling good, you go back to like what it was. And if it's like you make the change and rowing feels worse, then that's a failure. It's like as much as possible getting directed towards that.
Yeah, and I can see it now. So if we're out coaching and I give an athlete a drill and I want them to row in a certain way, and they're doing really good work in that, and you go, right, well, I'm going to go off with this athlete, I'll see you in 2 or 3 K's time,
Yeah.
go back, and they're just gone back to normal, or they're still, or this is where, again, where you can start to judge athletes a little bit, and you're like, well, this person's going to go, because they're still doing that drill that I gave them half an hour ago, and they're still attacking it and they're making improvements. Or here's this other athlete who, the moment I've left, has gone back to sort of safety, comfy mode. Well, that's not what we're looking for. You've got to have that. You can't. It's just like I said, and actually said it to some of our athletes recently. It's like, when you line up on the start line at Henley, I'm not going to be in the boat with you. I'm not going to be telling you what to do. You've got to be able to execute this stuff yourself, and you've got to be your own judge on what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, because you're not always going to have a coach on your shoulder. I think some of them expect that, but even with sort of 100%. Reduced numbers, we can't have a sort of 1-to-1 ratio all the time. We can give you some information, we can give you some drills to do, we can give you the tools to make the change, but that change is going to come from you. You've got to do that. I can't do it for you. And sometimes you get athletes who buy into that, and they tend to improve more, funnily enough. You get athletes who won't buy into that, and they'll but you know what, I'll flick that around a little bit and say, you can be like that as a coach as well. And I've suffered from this a little bit in the past, is being comfortable with an athlete's level, so not wanting to change them. So there was some really talented, and we know them, and they were around your time, some really fast, scullers and rowers who had sort of some technical faults that I was a little bit scared to change, because I was like, well... Whereas
with me, you're like, he's screwed. I was like,
well, he's crap anyway. We might as well break him down. What's the worst that can happen? But we had guys that were competing at genuinely like top end of their category within the country, and you're like, well, I don't want to mess with this, because then we might not get that. Actually, it's really cheesy, but I always come back to a scene from The Office.
This is going to be an interesting
the one with the dice, where he's sitting there going, I've got the dice and I'm sitting on a 3. I could roll the dice and I could get a 6. But I could also get a 1.
That's
and I'm like, well, that's a little bit like that. I've felt like that a little bit with some crews in the past. I'm like, oh, we're probably sitting on a 4 or a 5 here. These guys are quite good.
That's interesting.
I don't want to mess with this, because I might end up with a 1 by accident.
But the chances that you actually do, if you have the right buy, like, I remember I was working with a crew once. This is before the drawing stuff, and I remember they were going quite well, and they were like, it was 4 weeks before a race, and they were going well, but they were still a good bit off of where they wanted to be, and they were like, Jack, things are going pretty well right now, and I'm like, great, but like, you're still a good bit off of where you want to be, and they were so afraid to change anything, and they were one of those people that they really didn't make any changes ever, and they just constantly were stuck in the same cycle. And I think there was that fear, like, that was one thing that I always tried to do, was just like, even a race, I think you should be trying to like look to get better every stroke. And I think if you just have that mindset, like, what's one thing you can do better, you'll go for me, that was what I found how a really good way to approach racing. Was like, every stroke of a race, it's just another training session. I'm trying to get faster every stroke I take down the course. Okay, so any other traits then around, like, sort of those...
The better athletes? Or?
Around the ones that did well. Like, is it that, executing fundamentally as well? Maybe just in terms of, like, attitude around racing. Or like training or anything, any sort of behavior patterns that you notice, and then we can kind of sort to like round.
I'll go back to an interesting, well, it might be interesting, sort of the old story. So at the end of every year, you sometimes get some, these days, a WhatsApp message or a phone call or an email from some of the athletes going, I've had a good time, but I don't think I'm going to row next year, I want to do other things. And that's fine, you get natural sort of fallout from that. I remember it was 2015 maybe. I had an athlete who, they were quite good. They were kicking around our first date. Wasn't that quick at the time. They liked the social side of life, this side of the other, and I was like, they're quite good, but they're one of the ones I think might be quite flaky, and they might sort of disappear. So lo and behold, in August, sort of email pops into my inbox from this guy, and I'm like, oh, here we go, that's fine. But then I opened it up, and it was like, I've decided, basically, if I'm going to summarise it, I've decided I want to be really good at this. And I was like, all right, fair enough, here we go. And that guy went on and won a Henley medal, went to under-23 Worlds, went to the World Universities, got medals there. And it was just that shift in attitude from, okay, I want to be good at this. I think you have to make that decision.
Yeah, okay.
I think you have to make that decision, and then you have to start training better and training more consistently. And I don't like I hate the word, and it gets bandied about all these kind of conversations, sacrifice.
Yeah.
I hate it.
That, yeah.
There's always some guy who's getting funded by the state via the lottery going, oh, I've sacrificed this thing. You haven't sacrificed anything.
Shut up.
You've made a choice, and it's an absolute privilege to be able to row and do this great sport and have the means to do it at this level. So
I hate that.
leave out the sacrifice, hate it. But people make a choice to not do other things so that they can improve their rowing. And I think that has to come internally. Obviously, I can't. There's only so much me going around going, right, you need to sleep better, you need to eat better, you need to go out less. I'm not saying don't go out at all, but go out a little bit less and just look after your body a little bit more. But unless they make that decision themselves, it's probably not going to happen. Mm-hmm. So it's really interesting when I've seen some people make those decisions. So that was one athlete who did that. We've mentioned James already. I think he wasn't like that, but I think he made a decision that he was going to be really good. He was making improvements, but he was like, right, I'm going to be really good. I think he actually said to me, I can't remember, I might be misquoting him, I think I pissed him off by putting him in the second day.
I think
he was like, you know what?
I know for a fact, I wasn't going to say it.
Yeah, that's fine. I don't mind that. You see, if every athlete took that attitude, brilliant. Because we sometimes think, and I don't want to throw any Edinburgh students under the bus, we think some people are quite happy just to row along in a second day. And if you just want to row and enjoy the sport, then fine. But we want people who want to improve and want to get in the top boats and want to win in the top boats. It shouldn't necessarily be an end in itself to make a crew, but then to make that crew go fast. Yeah. So if people have got a point, if that motivates people, having a point to prove, and I've pissed them off, brilliant. But he was another one I think just made that sort of, you could see that sort of, right, I've made a decision, I'm going to be really good, and just take that on a little bit. Mm-hmm. So that's, I guess, another trait. And I guess you probably did that as well, to some extent.
Yeah,
your career was going a little bit like that. You did really good stuff, and then little dips here and there, but then I think you really knuckled down, and then saw the improvement as a consequence.
What you were saying reminded me of what made a difference, which was I used to always say, okay, I'm going to go one more year, and if I improve, I'm going to do another year, and if I keep improving, I'm going to keep going, and I'm going to, as soon as I get to a point where I can't do anything more, and I feel like I'm doing everything I can, then I'll stop. But it wasn't until I put down the ultimatum, and I was like, it was going into that 2019-2020 year, where I was like, if I don't get into the GB team by the end of this year, I'm done. And it was like that kind of decision of like, no, if this doesn't happen, then I'm doing that. And that ultimatum just was totally, I was getting better and I was training better every time, but that ultimatum for me was just total. And as a result, we started to perform a lot better and beat people in the GB team. So yeah, it's interesting.
But you'd love to take credit for that as a coach, but I don't think you can.
Well,
a lot of the time, I mean, as we provide the environment, provide the information, maybe provide a little bit of motivation, but it's very much internally driven, that part. So you can't take too much credit for that one.
Well, yeah, it's just clear. I think the big thing that jumped out for me was just the path that you would set out. It's like that's what I said when people have went to me for advice about joining Edinburgh and going well. I'm like, just listen to Colin. Just do it. Tell them what you want to do and then just do it. Is that simple? You
come along and tell the current lot.
Edinburgh University, if you guys want to win Henley, just listen to what he says and then do it. It's literally that simple. Yeah. And that's what my old coach Ricky as well. People would ask me, totally different training approach, old school, but it works. Yeah. And people, Jack, what advice do you have for me? I'm like, just fucking do it, he says. Just listen, do it, and it will work. So that's the real diff. And then the intangibles, the athlete, of course, there's only so much you can do.
I think there's less, and I'm not going to throw current generation under a bus because I'll just sound like an old man going, music was better in my day and all that kind of stuff. But I've definitely noticed that current generation of students, etc., I think they're less likely just to do what they're told. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing on their part. They're individuals, but I think they're slightly more opinionated. They're not as willing just to sort of go, okay, cool, let's do that. And again, I don't mind questions, but I think the trying to get them to believe in what you're doing is harder.
Really,
I've found.
Right,
and that's
yeah.
not trying to have a go at them. Generations move on, and they've got different ways, but this generation I think is slightly different. But that's a challenge for me as a coach, rather than I can sit here and go, that's, they just need to do what I tell them all the time, and that would be great. But if I just do that, then we're just going to go backwards. I've got to recognise that, okay, people are different.
And the standard is still moving forward.
And the standard's moved on. I've got to adapt a little bit with that. And I find that hard as a coach right now. I'm like, I just want you to do what I tell you to do. And then we'll go okay. But I don't think that's going to happen. But
interesting.
There's no point in me just sort of bashing my head against a brick wall. I've got, right, these young people are talented and able. I've got to adapt what I'm doing a little bit. And that's why it's great having a coaching team with me now, because I can still be the grumpy one that's setting out the program with this, and these guys are much better at delivering.
Good cop, bad cop.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm always bad cop. I can't remember if I've ever been a good cop in my entire life, but put the bad cop role in and let these guys deliver it and deal with the soft skills is probably what I'm bashing on about. That was probably never my forte. Occasionally it comes out, but not.
What you could tell with you is that like you were yourself, like you were, and that was another thing I think I see strengths in coaches is like when you are your personality and like it's not, you're not fabricating it, you're not saying this coach did this so I'm trying to copy that, but I definitely see one difference I noticed with the new generation. I'm only 30, but like having tried to partner with different people on social media, that's one thing the only thing I can say is different about younger generations is they're far more open to like social media partnering for like different sort of brands and stuff like that, compared to older companies that are like, they see absolutely no value in it. So that's the only difference I can see, notice, but Anyways, I don't know, we've been going on for a while here, and I think we can maybe wind things up. You're like, get me out of here.
Alright, I like talking about rowing. Any opportunity to sit and talk about rowing. So if I sat and talked about rowing at home like this, my wife would be pretty disappointed pretty quickly.
Fair enough. Yeah, cool. So okay, you guys are going for Henley this year. Anything, I don't know, anybody's looking to, interest in Edinburgh, how do they get in touch? Like, I guess
so we have our social media channels, so you can follow Edinburgh Rowing on Instagram.
Which is some cool content, I think, in terms of like what other clubs have. You can
we're looking at improving all that. There's a lot of changes going on in Edinburgh in terms of how we are doing things like that, in terms of we've got to market ourselves better. It's a horrible term, marketing yourself, but we have to do that. It's a competitive market to get good athletes in. And if we go way back to the start of the conversation, we're saying what's next to move us on is we need to keep attracting good athletes to come into the program to move us up to the next level. We don't ever want to get away from developing our own athletes as well, but we're just trying to pull in some better athletes as well. So we now have better scholarships on offer at Edinburgh. We can offer what I would suggest is pretty competitive in the UK market, at least, undergraduate and postgraduate scholarships to support your rowing. We can help with accommodation. We can help with entrance into university as well. So getting into Edinburgh is quite hard. It's one of the most oversubscribed universities in the UK. We're a sort of world top 20, top 30, depending on which rankings you use academically, so it's pretty popular to get in, but we can help with that as well. So you get in touch with me, I can help you a little bit in that entrance process, just get you over the line. If you're trying to do that, then through our website, which is edinburghrowing.co.uk, and Edinburgh Rowing on Instagram, or directly to me. I'm sure you can link me into your...
No.
Cannot,
of course.
If you look on our Sport Edinburgh website, then all the details are there to get in touch with myself or the coaches. We just had a couple of open days. It was great to see a load of athletes there, come and see around our facilities, and I'll take them on a tour, do a little bit of a talk about what we can offer and if we're a good fit for them. So I always try and not just get anyone at any cost, but go, this is how we operate. We're quite open about that. There's lots of other good university programs out there. I wouldn't talk any of them down, but I just try and talk us up and go, like, this is what we can offer. If you want to come to us, great. If you want to go to other people, that's fine.
Cool. Absolutely fair enough. Cool. Alrighty. Thank you, Colin, for coming on, and I've really enjoyed hearing the insight. And I'm sure any athletes or coaches, like athletes in a program, how to get more out of the program, coaches in a program, how to get more out of the program, and no, it's been great. Thanks for letting me
talk about rowing for an hour and a half or whatever it's been.
Cheers.
Been good.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cut. Cool.
All right.
Alrighty. Thank you very much.
No, that was
I know this is good.